Day 8 of Instagram Quilt Fest is already here. We feel like it's zooming along, and today is all about scrappy finish. And here is my first scrappy finish of the year besides some of my 3-yard scrappy quilts. And I am very excited how it came together. So I went ahead and did a stripey binding because it was in my stash, and I thought about doing scrappy like I had mentioned before, and otherwise it just didn't happen. I just didn't have a good enough size chunks to do a scrappy binding. It took me 4 strips to get all the way around, which is a nice amount of strips to get through. And with this kind of thing, these pieces, I consider this a scrappy quilt because they're just kind of hodgepodge together, at least this version. I did shop intentionally when I made this quilt in the first place, but since it kind of just came from sitting, I threw it together and I scrappied my binding. I Frankensteined it. I used that batting heat tape, and that seemed to work really well. I think I need to make more quilts of this size to help work with my batting scraps, and so those are going to be some scrappy finishes coming in my future, is getting those batting scraps to be baby quilt size so that they can go along and be gone. So otherwise, some other scrappy quilts that I've done that I've really liked are the twister quilt. I've done this musical twister quilt, all from scraps, especially during COVID when I wasn't going out and buying more fabric. I kind of used those to work along. And then Trixie's twister quilt came as scraps from this crystal cluster quilt, and I kind of pieced some other things in to make it a nice little, I'd say lap size, but I guess it's a cat size. So those all came together. And then this twister quilt here, I bought the charm pack, but then I used grunge scraps to kind of fill in the holes and fill in the void of what I needed to make the quilt top. In addition to the twister quilt, I also made this ugly quilt. That's really what it's called. It's from Karen Brown from Just Get It Done Quilts. She calls it her ugly quilt. And so I did it with some Marvel scraps, and they were all scraps from quilts I had made for my friends for their wedding. So this was their wedding quilt, and something I had made for my sister, I'm sure. It was a fun quilt to kind of put together and then also see how the chaos was happening. So that's on my list to make another of this year with whatever scraps I can find in this place. I think I might find a few, but other than that, that one was really fun. And then during COVID, Cali Quilt Co., before I even started working there, did the village quilt sew along, and for that I used all my Kona scraps. And at that point they were all left over from different foundation paper piece projects I had done, whether it was this Lion King quilt or this Winnie the Pooh quilt or my sister's Boba Fett pillow. And so I just had pieces and scraps, and I made all my houses very colorful, and then I used all my gray scraps for doors, and that actually chunked out a lot of different things. And once I finished it, I kind of did a scrappy back, and I was sitting there going, who can I give this rainbow quilt to? And I actually gave it to a good friend of mine who also was one of my bridesmaids at my wedding, and she loved it. It was totally up her style. That's kind of why I did the back the way it was, because I knew it was going to her. So I had a lot of fun. I do love a good scrappy quilt. And so with that, I am still planning on looking into Scrappiness is Happiness. I've had a couple of people ask me, when are you going to start that? It's coming, I promise. Once I get a little bit more cleaned up and organized in here so I can see a little bit more of my scraps, I'm going to pick something out of here and do that. And there's also another tool that I have that I want to show you that I'm going to plan to do with a scrappy quilt. So I also bought a while ago the wonky log cabin trim tool. I'm trying to do this without getting that reflection on there, but it makes a log cabin that's wonky. So I think this is going to be a fun way to get through some scraps as well. And so I need to unwrap this, at least make a couple blocks here and there. If I can at least make one block and show you at the end of the month, that's my goal. So I'm going to set this out so it's looking at me and not tucked in my drawer of my husky like it has been. So there's my little bit about scrappy quilts. And now let me show you some footage of putting on the binding and some detail photos of my little kitty hexagon quilt.